Hey, what is going on everybody? My name is Payne and welcome to another anime review video. I don't know if I mentioned this before in any of my past videos, I don't think I did, but I am open to suggestions of any show that I'll be able to review in the future. Whether if it's a show that just ended in this past anime season, was spring 2018, that's what just ended, to a show or a movie that aired 30 years ago, any studio would work. Unfortunately, any genre would work as well. Basically, I'm open to any shows right now. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because the show that I'm going to be talking about today is a show that was suggested to me by an Instagram user who sent me the first opening to this show, and only told me that this show had good graphics. Considering that at the time, I was working on two videos. I was working on the Kiss X Sis review, and I was working on the Darling and the Franxx review. All I could really do was watch the show, at least, because I've heard of the show once or twice. But now here we are. It has been about maybe a week, a little over a week. Yeah, week and a half since the show was suggested. And now I'm going to be reviewing my first suggested video, rather than a show that I picked myself, just like the past ones. And that show is Nagi no Asukara. Nagi no Asukara, also known as Nagi-Asu, A Lull in the Sea, is a drama, fantasy, and romance anime directed by Toshiya Shinohara, written by Mari Okada, and was made by the studio PA Works. It aired in the fall of 2013 and consisted of 26 episodes. It started out as a manga that produced 6 volumes from 2013 to 2016, starting production 6 months before the show began, and then shortly after that, a 4-panel manga was made on September 27th, 2013, the literal week before the show began. The show takes place in a fantasy world where there exist 2 different subspecies of humans. In this story, people originally came from the ocean. However, over time, there were ones who started crawling up on land as well to see what was above the surface. Fast forward ages later, the population has been split completely into land people and sea people, and they generally live quite isolated from each other. The story here follows 4 childhood friends from the sea, Hikari, Chisaki, Monica, and Kaname, living in an underwater village called Shio. For various reasons, their local middle school closes down, and they have no choice but to transfer to a school above the surface. They find out that trying to adapt to life on land is not an easy thing, as they have to constantly keep themselves wet in order to not dry out their enna, which is a protective shell given to the sea people by the sea god, which is what enables them to live and breathe underwater in the first place. Furthermore, there is substantial discrimination and tension between the land people and the sea people, which keeps raising new hurdles for the group of friends. Other characters in the show include Tsumugu, who is a fisherman on the surface and befriends the 4 friends. There's Akari, who is Hikari's older sister. Took me a while to try and get to that. There is Lord Uroku, who is the messenger for the sea god in Shio. And then there's 2 elementary school friends named Miuna and Sayu. The story presents itself as a slice of life in the beginning, with the main focus being on problems the main characters have on the surface. Now, for some people, the pacing of the first half might be a bit slow, but there's a good reason for that. As a character-driven anime, Nagi no Asukara has to focus on its characters a lot and flesh them out properly, and this show does just that. The show uses a lot of its time developing its characters and making sure that they feel more like actual people, rather than flat characters that you care little about. But when the second half comes along, the show takes a turn from slice of life to being more dramatic. And this is where the show falls short on a few things. Many slice of life romances that try to implement drama in their plot tend to be overly melodramatic. And this also seems to be the problem with this show. Its second half is full of drama, basically. From unrequited love to arguing, the show sometimes becomes quite frustrating in the dramatic parts. Many parts felt uncomfortably lengthened because of the melodrama and how the characters are so unwilling to talk and make up after an argument. Now, although to me this wasn't a major problem, it still dampened the experience as a whole. For me, just a little bit. I didn't really have a problem with it. At first, the characters felt very stereotypical. Hikari is the main character that gets mad at a lot of things and gets the viewer pissed off because of how much of a jackass he can be, and I know because there are times he was seen as very egotistical, especially in the first half of the show, and it got me pissed off, but eventually I got over it. There's Monica, who is basically that one character that was made to be cute and cater to the audience. Sumugu was the smart one in the show that would preach life lessons to the other characters. Kaname was seen as the handsome guy. It really, there were times where it felt like he didn't really have any development. And Chisaki is that one girl who is kind all the time and joins in on the love triangle in the story, the main love triangle in the story. As you can see, the cast doesn't seem to be very likable or original in the beginning, but what the director Shinohara, the writer Okada, and PA Works does a really good job on, though, is putting a serious amount of depth to the characters and developing them immensely over the course of the show, making the characters develop dramatically and feel way more alive as the show keeps going. As you get to learn more about the characters through the show, you feel way more connected to the characters as they turn into characters that you actually care about, not 2D characters that you forget about after you finish watching the show, but characters that make an impression on you. But that's not it. Insert Sayu and Miyuna. Although they received development in the later part of the show, most of their development is in the second half, they do receive a decent amount of development as a whole throughout the entire series. And although they might not get as much depth as the other characters sometimes, I ended up caring for them just as much as the main cast. And another way to say it is that in the second half of the series, Sayu and Miyuna were basically part of the main cast as the second half of the series rolled in. Another part of the show that I thought was interesting, because you don't really see it that much in other shows like this, is that this has one of the biggest and most complicated love webs I have ever seen. Almost every main character in this show loves someone else. It doesn't matter who it is. And watching this web unfold, in my opinion, is truly an enjoyable experience as I watch the characters grow up to see how they coped with their feelings. But unlike 99% of all romance anime out there, this show, surprisingly, is actually unpredictable. Normally, you barely have to watch 5 minutes of the first episode of an anime or TV series in order to know with almost complete certainty who's going to hook up with who. Unless there turns out to be no development at all, which is even worse. But in this case, that's not it. For one, back to the main characters. The cast is rather large, as well as evenly divided in gender. There is also really no one that could be called a protagonist in this series. Hikari probably gets the most screen time, but I wouldn't really call him as the protagonist or the leader in this whole show. Point being is that it never really feels like anyone has any innate advantage when it comes to the love rivalry, simply due to the concept of the plot armor, because they all appear to be on fairly even grounds from start to finish. Above all, though, in addition to the love web thing, let's paint an image here. If you were to draw up all the main characters and their various crushes in a relationship graph, you would very quickly realize that there are just way too many arrows, and there's no obvious nor optimal solution in sight to all these problems that these characters are having in terms of who they have a crush with. Adding to the huge part of the story that is that every main character loves at least one person in this show. Hell, I didn't even know how any of this would even turn out until it was very close to the end of the series. And that's something extraordinarily rare in anime. We don't really see that much, which itself is a pretty bad realization for the sake of the anime industry. It's not a really good sign, and I hope they get better, but I digress. All the love drama aside, the character development in this show is fantastic. Each and every character feels like they all serve a purpose, and they add something critical to the bigger picture. The anime covers a quite large time span, and there is plenty of opportunity to see how everyone matures and changes over the course of the story, because that is one of the key points in the show, and that is change. All the members of the main character cast have very specific and detailed personalities and depth behind them, and you never get the feeling that any of them are any less important than the other. I guess really the best way to explain it is, if you take away all the supernatural aspects of this show, with the fact that there are people living on sea and land, there is a constant sense of realism when it comes to the characterization in this show, and it just kept getting better and better the longer it went because of it. If there was one thing that you would realize within the first few minutes of the very first episode, if you were to stop this video and you watch the series right now It's that the visuals of the show are just simply out of this world phenomenal. I'm not talking as much about like the facial expressions or the character designs, etc. Although they are really good, I'm really talking about the environments in this show. Everything involving the sea, especially, is breathtaking, is just amazing, is just absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. The underwater world and its submerged town has all kinds of marine creatures swimming around in perfect detail, and the lighting that's coming through the surface, which works sort of like the sky in this case, like another sky if you're looking at it from the bottom of the sea, and how it refracts with the water almost looks futuristic, which I think is really cool. I gotta give PA Works credit here. They really outdid themselves this time around with the animation. That's not to say that the surface world is that much less impressively looking in any way. I also think the surface world is also really good as well. I just don't really have that much to say about it other than the fact that it's really solid throughout. It's just that it gets outshined simply by how gorgeous the ocean is, or under the ocean, which is just thinking about it's making me smile. It's beautiful. I suggest you when you watch this show to really pay attention to the animation. To make it simple for some people, it's basically the opposite of Super Mario Brothers, where people actually like the water level compared to, people like playing on the surface more. And I don't know, I'm just bringing in a gaming reference because, I've had history with that. But in all seriousness, I can't really praise it enough. This was easily the best part of the show for me. The soundtrack is actually pretty hard to comment on, and the reason for this is that the music is generally pretty quiet. It doesn't have any sort of epic soundtrack or, any catchy or emotional music, but rather it goes with a generally ambient theme that tries to upplay the atmosphere of the show in general as well as its key scenes, and as far as that goal goes, I think it does the job pretty well. But on the flip side, it also results in the individual tracks of the show not being very memorable, as they're pretty much only good alongside the show itself and not as something that you would ever listen to on its own in a music playlist. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, it's just simply the way it works. This is not the first time we've seen this, it's not the last time we're going to see it. It's part of basically how to make a show. There's times where the soundtrack is just not that good. The various opening and ending themes would probably fall into the category of it's good, but not great for me. Originally I wasn't too fond of them, but as I kept watching the show, it kind of grew on me over time as the show kept getting more and more emotional. The first opening and ending theme were pretty catchy, while as the second half took a dramatic turn, the second opening especially, the ending was really good, but the second opening became more memorable than the first one, not because of the music, but because of the intro that played while the music was going on, giving it a more serious tone to a song that alone doesn't have a serious tone in the first place. Overall, I feel that the music was mostly intended as a supporting aspect for the other categories in the show rather than something that's intended to be great on its own. It's not the most common way of approach, but if it was indeed the producer's goal to make a soundtrack that doesn't really have that much by itself, then I think it was executed fairly well. But unfortunately, this is the only time we're actually going to see it. This show took up almost all the spare time I had over the course of the 3 days that it took to marathon it after this was suggested to me when I was not filming the last two videos. It had this constant drive of making you want to know more, not just what's going to happen to the characters in focus, but also regarding the entire population of the two human subspecies and the world itself. It's extremely immersive, and it has a huge sense of realism too, that it makes it really hard not to get absorbed by it. Also, like I mentioned earlier, it's less predictable than most anime series out there, so you can never take what's going to happen next for granted, and unfortunately you don't really see that in that many shows, or any that execute it really well. Nagi no Asukara is a series for people seeking feels and beautiful landscapes. It utilizes environments you normally never get to see in anime, and it does so with style. It once again showcases that a seemingly stereotypical concept can be extremely successful when you add one or two plot twists on a very basic level, as well as boost it with a very high production value, just like what they have with PA Works. It also makes you care, not just for the main characters, but for everyone and everything in it. as the scope of this show is unusually large. And so, with its beautiful atmosphere, great characters, and very interesting story, it was tough to find a rating for this show. I had to go with my gut for this, and my gut said that it was either going to be a 9 or a 10, 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10, but I went with my gut on this, and my gut says to give Nagi no Asukara a perfect 10 out of 10. This is a major diamond in the rough that should definitely be watched by both romance anime fans and slice of life anime fans, as well as some fantasy anime fans in some cases, because of the concept that there are sea people and land people. This is definitely a really good show, and I highly suggest it to anyone who has the time to watch it. Thank you guys for watching my Nagi no Asukara review. If you liked this video, hit the like button down below. If you want to see more anime review videos in the future, hit the subscribe button, either on the screen or down below. And if you want to see some past anime review videos, you can click on any of the anime review YouTube videos on the screen, or you can go down to my channel, as there will be a list of videos waiting for you. And if there is any show that you would like to suggest, you can leave them down in the comments below. And once again, guys, my name is Payne, and I will see you in the next anime review video.